Today we are going to see the concept called constraints in SQL Server. So yesterday, what is the topic that we have covered? Data types. Okay. So while we are creating the table, what are the data types that we need to assign to the columns in order to maintain the data? Okay. So it is just like I'm going in a like like while I'm explaining this SQL topics, so I have selected the path in a step-by-step manner. So first of all, I have shown you how to create a database. Inside that, how to create a table. Okay, and after that, how to provide the necessary data types while creating the columns inside the table. Then the next step is, so what are the conditions that we need to remember to insert the data into this table? After creating a table, what we will do? We will insert the data. Okay, so before going to insert the data, we have to see some rules. Okay, we have to see some rules and some principles which we need to follow. Okay, so if you will be able to remember these rules, so you will not insert the bad data into this table. Okay, excuse me 1 minute. Before going to insert the data into this table, so what are the things and what are the standards or what are the conditions that we need to remember? Okay, so why we need to follow the rules? We can directly insert the data into the table. No, what is the necessity of these rules and conditions? See, in order to maintain the quality of data in the table, we have to follow these rules. Okay, so if you will not follow these rules or constraints, what will happen is the data will not be good. I mean, the quality of the data will be very less. I mean, how we can define the quality? In order to define the quality, there are so many things. Suppose if you'll have the duplicates, that is not a proper data. Okay, if you have a more number of values, that is not the proper value, the proper data. Okay, if you have any meaningless values, that is not proper data in the table. Okay, so first of all, let me give you few examples which will define the quality of data. Then I will show you how we can use these constraints in order to maintain the quality of data. Okay, so for your understanding purpose, see, these are the 5 important things that will define the quality of data. Always remember, no duplicates. Table should not contain the duplicates. No null values. Table should not have the null values. No undefined values. Table should not have the undefined values. No meaningless values. Table should not have meaningless values. No irrelational values. That means what? We are working with a relational database. So if you will not follow that relational database management system, and if you will maintain the data in that way, that is called irrelational values. Okay, so we should not have these values in order to in order to maintain the quality of data. Okay, so first of all, I'm giving an example to explain you about the bad data in the table. Okay, if there is no proper quality, that is called bad data. Okay, now I'm creating one table. I have created one table here. Now let me show you. Do we have any data in this table? No. Now let me insert the data into this table. One record I have inserted. So what is that record? This is one Narendra, Bangalore, and gender M. So after that, after my turn, somebody has inserted the data into this table. Okay. Now, now total how many records are there in the table? See, one Surendra. Here, have you observed or not? Employee ID became duplicate. Okay, so I got employee id 1 and some other person also got employee id 1. So while we were searching the data with our employee ids, not the names, with our employee ids, so what we got here, select star from employees where employee id equal to 1. So this way I have queried the table to see my data. Now after executing this query, I can see two persons information. As a Narendra, I'm executing this query, I can see the Surendra data also, which is not correct. Okay, so how this duplicates has been generated into this table. Here we have given the privilege to the employee to insert their data. Okay, so I have inserted the value 1 because I like this number 1, and some other person also inserted the same data into this table. Okay, so like this, without having a knowledge or without having a proper idea, if users will insert the data into this table, so the data will become like this. Okay, there is no meaning and there is no quality of this data right now. Okay, so some other person has inserted the data like this. Okay, 3 records inserted. Now can you please look into this? See, we have one null value. So null means what? In SQL Server, while working with the data and databases, please remember, null value is very dangerous value. Okay, null value is very dangerous. So why it is dangerous? Because it doesn't have any proper definition in the data. So people can tell you null equal to nothing, and you can listen null equal to something, and you can listen null equal to anything. Okay, so there is no proper definition. So null value could be nothing, something, anything. So what is the constant definition for the null value? Nobody can tell that. As of now, I have never seen anybody who can give you the definition, proper definition for the values called null value. Okay, because it is not possible for anybody. So that is the reason null value try to avoid as much as possible. Okay, particularly for the important columns. Suppose if you are maintaining the data of email address or phone number, those two are very important in order to contact a person. If you will have the null values in such type of columns, what will happen? You cannot reach that person. You can have the data one Surendra Hyderabad, but so how you will contact? There are so many Surendras in Bangalore. Okay, there are so many Narendras in Hyderabad. So how you will contact them? You should have some unique information with you, like phone number or SSN number or email address. Okay, without that, we cannot reach out that person. Okay, so that is the reason null values in some columns, like let us say for example address 1 and address 2. Address 2 is optional. If you can have the null value in that address 2, nobody I mean, it's not a problem while maintaining the data. If you will have the null value in the address 1, what will happen? Address 1 is the primary address. We should have the proper value instead of null value. That is why, so null value is unnecessary column, okay, but null value in necessary columns is not okay. Please remember. Okay, so that is not the proper way to maintain the data. We have to avoid this null values. And see, look at this record, third record. So we have all the cities properly, but for this person Robert, we don't have any city. Okay, so if the city is not there, so if whenever we are representing this information, what we will show? Can we display as a no city or nothing or not available? So how we will define this information? So we should have a proper value. If the user doesn't wants to insert the data for city, so we have to provide some default value which is having a meaning like not available, not interested, not reachable, like that we can insert. But this particular field should not be empty or should not be null. Okay, I will show you how to overcome these problems. And coming to gender, so there are, in the universe there are only two genders, gender M, gender F. So we don't have any gender called A. That means what? Okay, this is called meaningless value, this is undefined value, this is null value, this is duplicate value. Okay, so we have a duplicate values, we have a null values, and we have undefined values, we have meaningless values. So in order to satisfy all these requirements, I have created this particular table. Okay, if you will maintain the data in this format or in this fashion, uh, the quality is very less. Okay, this data is not that much effectively useful for any applications. Okay, now we can see the data should not be like this. Now what we need to understand here, how we will overcome these duplicates, how we will overcome this null values, I mean how we can restrict these type of problems in the future. Okay, in order to protect the data, from these conditions, so we have a concept called constraints. Constraint, that means rule or condition. Okay, so people used usually, when they were discussing something about in a meetings, they used to mention one word. So this is what my constraint, that means that is their condition, that is their principle. Okay, which they want to consider or which they want to follow. Okay, so here in the concept called constraints in SQL will tells you how we can protect the data from these uh, like you know undefined processes. Okay, from these defined problems we can protect our data. Okay, so in order to protect the data we have list of 7 constraints. Okay, so we have to follow very strictly these constraints in order to protect the data. If you will follow once, if the table has satisfied with this with respect to all these constraints, you can tell them my quality, my data is very clean and very clear. Okay, and the quality of the data is really good if you will properly maintain these constraints. So what are the constraints that we are having in SQL? Identity, not null, default, check, unique, primary key, foreign key. Total 7 constraints. Okay, so each and every constraints will have some meaning and purpose. Identity will generate some auto will create some auto generated values in a proper sequence in order to maintain the uniqueness of the data. Okay, and not null, the name of the constraints will tells you not null, I will not allow the null values. Default, if you will not give anything, so system will give you one value that is called null value. So in order to give the null value, okay, we will, if we will follow this default constraint, so it will create one meaningful default value. Okay, and check constraints, before inserting the data into the table I will check with respect to few conditions whether this data is valid or not. So that is called check constraint. Unique constraint, so it will maintain all the values in a unique way. Okay, suppose one person cannot have two email addresses. Okay, and SSN number is unique, email address is unique, phone number is unique, like this. Whenever you want to maintain the data in unique way, you can just take this unique constraint. Primary key and foreign key, so in which type of database we are working? We are working with a relational database management system. If you want to maintain the relationship between the tables, you have to have primary key and foreign key. Okay, I will show you all the constraints one by one with an examples. I mean, not in a one day. This will take this itself will take 2 days. Okay, total concepts. Today I will explain few constraints, and tomorrow I will explain few other constraints. Okay. Now, first of all, let me start with identity constraint. What is this identity constraint? Now, as I told you, it will create some auto generated values. Okay, that means what? Auto generated means automatically values generated, you don't need to generate anything. So how the values will be automatically generated? These values will be generated by seed and increment. Okay, seed and increment. So seed is nothing but what? Starting point, with what value you want me to generate the values. Increment, with what value you want me to increment the data, you want me to increment the values in that particular column. Okay, so when the values will be generated, whenever you will insert the data into the table, then only values will be generated. Let us say, for example, we are doing one transaction. Suppose we are purchasing something online, like I'm going to order iPhone mobile in eBay site. Okay, so at the end of the purchase, or at the end of that particular transaction only, I will have one reference number. That reference number, is it possible to get before the transaction? No. That means what? So all the data, whatever the process that you are doing in the transaction, that has to be completed successfully, then only you will have the reference number. Here also, identity will generate the values once the data is inserting into the table. If the data is not inserting into the table, it will not generate the values. Okay, once the data will be inserted into the table, it will create one unique identifier for that row. Okay, that is called identity. So identity means nothing but what? Which will help us to identify the data uniquely in the system. That is called identity constraint. So this identity values will always in your hands. So what seed and increment, you can start the values from any number. So 1 comma 1 is a default number. Okay, so don't think that that is the only standard. You can start from 100, you can start from 1 lakh, you can start from 2 lakhs also. It's up to you. And increment also, it is in your hands. You can increment the values by 1, 2, 3, 4, -1, -0, anything you want to increment. Okay, so seed and increment always in your hands, but the default seed and increment is 1 comma 1. That is a global standard. Okay, everywhere we will have 1 comma 1 only. Okay, now let me show you how we can use this identity constraint over the table. I'm going to drop the table, existing table. Now, please create table employees. Okay, so I just want to maintain employee ID in a unique fashion. Okay, so whenever employee has joined, whenever, suppose if you have joined in any organization, after joining, after filling few forms only, your employee ID will generate. Okay, so your employee ID will not generate unless and until you will submit everything into that organization. Can you get the employee ID without joining into that organization? No, it is not possible. Everybody, we will get this employee IDs after completing the process. Okay, so after giving all the documents, they will enter your name, your details, your education, your salary, your experience, everything they will enter in the system. Once they have entered into the system will give you one number, that is called employee ID. Here also, in order to maintain the employee ID, I have given this identity. That means what? This ID will be generated by the system, not by you. If the system is generating, it will take care about the duplicates. If you will generate the ID, maybe there are some duplicates will happen. Okay, so that is why I'm giving this control to system, not to you, not to your user. Okay, let me create this table. Now, do we have any data in the table? Please see, no data. Now, I'm going to insert the data of Narendra. So look at this. How many columns I'm having here? Please look into these columns. I'm having 1, 2, 3, 4. Total 4 columns. Suppose if I want to insert the data, to how many number of columns I need to provide the data? To 3 columns, not 4 columns. Okay, why? Because employee ID is nothing but identity column. Why we need to provide the data? We don't need to provide the data. Okay, if the column is having an identity constraint, so we just leaving that column to system will take care about that column, but we are going to take care about only other columns. What are the other columns? Name we have to provide, city we have to provide, gender we have to provide. That is the reason Narendra will come to name, Bangalore will come to city, and gender will come to M. This is the data what it is going to generate. Okay, now after giving all the data, let me show you how it will works. We don't have any data at this moment. Please look into that. I'm just giving only 3 values. So how employee ID will generate? Employee ID will be generated after data is inserted into the table. Execute. One row affected. So I have given 1 comma 1. That means what? The value should start with 1. Okay, increment by 1. First of all, we have inserted only one record. No, then you will not understand the identity process completely. First of all, just see whatever the data that is inserted. See, 1 Narendra, Bangalore, M. Okay, so who has given the value called 1? While I'm inserting the data, is the value 1 is there? No, it's not there. But how we got the 1? Because of identity constraint. Now let us insert the second record. Second record, I'm inserting Surendra, Hyderabad, M. So do we have any employee ID here? Am I inserting any employee ID here? No. Employee ID you don't need to insert, it will be generated automatically. Please look into that. One row affected. So total how many rows affected? 2 rows affected. Now see, you said 1 comma 1, start with 1, increment by 1. So first record we got the 1. So whenever the user will insert the second record, so 1 plus 1 2. If I will insert the third record, 2 plus 1, what is the value? 3. Like this sequentially employee IDs will getting generated based on the joining time, based on the joining date. Suppose today I have joined, tomorrow some other person joined. Tomorrow, for today I will get the value 1. Tomorrow he will get the value 2. Day after tomorrow 3, like that. Okay, so it will be based on the data what we are inserting, the numbers also sequentially generated automatically. Okay, now let me insert the another record. Let me insert 3 records. Okay, 3 records I have inserted. So what will happen right now? At this moment I have, before inserting these 3 records, so I have 2 records in the table. 2 plus 1 3, 3 plus 1 4, 4 plus 1 5, because 3 records, 2 plus 3 5 records are there in the table. Now you can see. Okay, right now I'm concentrating only on the duplicates. I will handle the null values, city, and meaningless values. Just to show you, in order to show you, I have inserted this data. Okay, once the data has been inserted, ID value will automatically generated by identity constraint. Okay, this is what an example of identity constraint. This identity can be, it could be anything, I'm telling you. Okay, you can have the range as per your interest. Okay, by default everywhere they will use 1 comma 1 only. Okay, Now let me drop this table. Now see, I'm giving employee ID int identity. Okay, employee id int identity. Now what is there here? Identity. So do I have any seed and increment here? No. Without seed and increment, can I create the table? People will ask you an interview question. Okay, so I will not specify any seed and increment while I'm creating the table. Can I insert the data into the table, or whether that constraint has will be created on the column? Yes, it will be created. I think I have already dropped it, right? Yes, I have dropped it. Now let me create that. Okay, so now table has been created. Okay, table creation is not a big deal. It will be automatically created. Now if we have not provided any seed and increment, what will be the range? Okay, what type of range that we will get once the data will be inserted? Okay, now see, if I will insert the data, so since I have not given identity, seed and increment, I'm not that much sure whether the data will be inserted for this table or not. Okay, oh, successfully inserted. Okay, good. Now see the data. How we got the one? Because we have not mentioned anything, any seed and increment which starts with one. But how we got one? Okay, fine. Okay, seed is one, that is clear. So if you will insert the second record only, then only we will understand, we will come to know that what is the increment. Let us insert two. That means what? Seed and increment is 1 comma 1. Okay, what is that? Seed and increment is 1 comma 1. So how we got this 1 comma 1? That is by default. Okay, for the identity constraint, if you will not provide seed and increment, system by default will give you 1 comma 1 as the seed and increment. Okay, remember, as per your interest, you can start the numbers from any value. Okay, and you can increment by any value, nobody will question you. Okay, so if you'll give 1 comma 1, it will start with 1 comma 1. If you'll give 100 comma 1, it will start with 100, incremented by 1. Suppose you have not provided any seed and increment as part of this table creation process, so by default you will get 1 comma 1. So where you can see this identity constraint has been there or not. Okay, select the table. There are two ways, my friends. One is select the table, just a table. No, don't select all the code. Select the table name. My table name is employees here. Alt F1. After selecting the table, what is the command? Alt plus F1 button. Both needs to be pressed at a time. Okay. You can see the properties. In the identity, what is the column? Employee ID. Seed 1. Increment 1. What does Alt F1 do? Alt F1 will give you the properties of a table. Okay, so you have created this table. Suppose, let us say for example, Ajosh, look at this. Somebody has created this table. You don't even know what are the data types of the table. Okay, so before you join that organization, the table has been created, and there is some data which is available readily. Okay, so you don't have the definition of the table. Okay, you don't know who has created, what are the constants on that call on the table, what are the data types and their sizes. So how we will see that information? We can see the data, but how we can see the properties? That is the reason. Select the table, type Alt F1, then it will tells you when the table got created. See, employees, DBO is the owner, and user table type. So when it got created, today only, 2015, 12, 14, 20, 25. Okay, and this is the column, this is the data type. Employee name, varchar, size 50, city, varchar 50, gender, care of 1, identity, employee ID column is the identity, seed and increment is 1 comma 1. Okay, so without seeing these properties of the table, can you identify what are the data types and what are the sizes and what are the constants that are available on the table? No, that is not possible. That is the reason. So we have the command called Alt plus F1. Select the table and then press Alt F1. If it is, I mean, if you are not clear with that, so you can just do this one also. SP underscore help employees. That day I told you, right? System defined words will be in a different colors. This is what maroon color. Okay, dark red, maroon. This is what blue. Okay, in going forward you will see some other colors also. I have already shown you pink color. Get date is the function which will be having a pink color. Okay, so like this all the comments are available. Okay, so that is what. Any questions with respect to this identity? Is there any command to change the name of a table? Yes, that is also there. I will show you probably when here data manipulation language 13. Okay, rename table underscore column. We can rename the table, we can rename the column also. Okay, right now we are at the 9th topic, so in the 13th topic I will show you. No questions? Okay, fine. Let me explain another constraint. What is the next constraint? Not null constraint. Okay, today I will stop with the not null constraint only because I have to go to office little bit early today because I have a meeting. Okay, I will explain this not null constraint and I will cover all the other constraints in the tomorrow class. Okay, tomorrow I will try to make it 10 to 15 minutes extra. Okay, I will compensate tomorrow. Now, in order to explain the next constraint, I'm going to drop the table. Why you need to drop the table? You can take another table. Now, actually, my target is by end of this concepts, by end of this constraints topic, in one table, I will show all the constraints. Okay, that is the reason. Suppose, let me tell you in detail. I have created this table called employee earlier. I have created identity. So the next constraint is not null constraint. While I'm explaining the second constraint, I will not ignore the first constraint. I will explain along with the first constraint whatever the second constraint I'm going to explain. See, identity I already explained, but still I will use it from now onwards. And I'm going to create the not null constraint. So not null is what type of constraint? If you want to restrict null values in any column, better to take this not null constraint. Once you will select this not null constraint, what will happen? No, that column will not allow the null values. The name of the constraint is what? Not null. That means I will not allow any null values. Okay. Now I have created this table. Okay. Now, do we have any data? No data. Now, so to which column I have given this not null constraint? Employee name column. That means what? If anybody wants to insert the null value into the column called employee name, table will not allow that. Okay. Cannot insert the value null into column employee name. Table SQL Server msba.dbo.employees column does not allow nulls insert fields. So very clearly it is telling us. So I am giving null value to which column? Employee name column. Since I'm giving the null value to employee name column and it is having a not null constraint on that, it will not allow the null values. Okay, so can we have look at the data of the table? No data. Why? Because the data was not inserted properly into the table. Okay, that is the reason no data in the table. Now, if I will insert this record, insert into employees values Narendra Bangalore M. So that means what? No null value in this data, no null value in this insert statement. Now, if I execute, let us look at the data. The data was properly inserted, but there is a small observation which you need to do with this data. Can you tell me what exactly is that? I mean, what is your observation over this data? So do you feel everything is correct or is there any change which is going beyond your expectation? It is what? Seed is 2. Yes. What? Why it is 2? Why it is 2 means, see, earlier, let me explain in detail. Now we have how many columns in the table? 4 columns. Okay. Employee ID. Okay. Employee, city, gender. Okay, so employee ID, employee name, city, and gender, these are the columns. Okay, so this particular column is having a identity constraint, okay, that we have already know, and this particular column will have not null constraint. Okay, so at the very first time we have inserted one record, we have tried to insert one record into this table. So in that record, what will happen? One null value is there. So that null value, that particular record was failed whenever it reaches to the column called employee name, because this column is having a not null constraint. So that insert statement having a null value that got failed at this point of time. Okay, so if that insert statement has failed at the second column, that means what? It has successfully crossed the first column. So what is the first column? Identity constraint. So the first column value is identity 1 has been generated, but unfortunately that statement got failed whenever it reaches to the second column. Then because of that, what happened? Even though the value has been generated in the memory, that physically not applied to the table. Okay, so that is the reason we lost the 1, and the next value that has been started with 2. Okay, 1 has been generated according to the identity system, but due to that reason that data was not inserted into the table. So when, since the value already generated in the next sequence in, I mean the next sequence in the memory is 2, whenever we have tried to insert the value, next value, that value we will get, the that value we will see 2 for that particular record. Okay, so that is how the logic will works. So whenever you are having a identity constraint, so these are the one type of problems that we can see. Okay, that the statement has successfully inserted into the table. If it is not, we will see this variations in the values. Okay, so many people used to ask me, Narendra, why can't we reset the values? Suppose the statement is not inserted, that record is not inserted into the table. So why we need to lose the value unnecessarily? Okay, suppose if we know that that particular record got not inserted, so we will start with the 1. We don't want to start with the 2. Okay, in that case, what we need to do is, whenever you will face that situation, immediately, immediately means right after that failure, don't insert any data. You need to reset the value. Okay, so in order to explain in detail, I will show you one thing. Now I have dropped the table. Okay, table created. Do we have any data in this table? No table, no data. Now if I will insert this particular record, what will happen? I will face one problem. I got one error. Now after this error, if I will insert the data, I will get 2, but I don't want to see 2, I want to see 1. In that situation, right after that failure, dbcc check identity employees reseed. Reseed means restart. Okay, seed is nothing but what? Starting point. Reseed means restarting. Okay, so if you give 0, it will start with 1. If you will give 1, it will start with the 2. It is kind of reverse process. Okay, so let me start. See, checking identity information, current identity value is 1. Okay, now if you will insert the data into this table, look at this. Earlier we got 2, but now we got 1 because of this reseed. Okay, so that is just an alternative. Okay, I have shown you the problem and how to fix that problem as well. Okay, in future we will not get this type of situations, this type of opportunities to change the, to reset the identity. Once it has been defined, it's defined, that's it. Okay, but some things, even though we are not going to use it, with respect to interview point of view, these questions are important. Okay, so they won't listen if you'll say, no, I haven't tried like this, we haven't, I didn't get the situation like that. That is not a, sometimes it's not a proper justification. Okay, so we have to know everything, whether we are using it or not using it. Okay, so this is one of the shortcut to get the values in a proper way. From now onwards, if you will insert the data now, then what will happen? All the sequence will be in a proper way. Hmm. Good question. Pratyusha is asking me what is a DBCC. That means DBCC stands for Database Consistency Checker. Okay, Database Consistency Checker. Actually, generally DBS will use this command. Okay, not developers, but developers also will use this type of commands at this type of situations. Okay, so all the DBCC work will belongs to DBS only, not to the developers. Okay, any questions so far with respect to not null identity to anybody? So these two, identity and not null, these two I cannot call it as a complete constraints, 100% constraints. These two can be referred as a properties also. Why? Because see, you will understand tomorrow why I'm telling you those two are the properties, not the constraints. Because these two constraints information, you can see identity will be understandable here, and not null also you can see here, nullable. No. So if there is any constraint, I mean extra additional constraint that is there in the table, we will have another partition here saying that constraints. Okay, that you will see in the tomorrow class. Okay, so identity and not null, because these two will serve the same kind of purpose to the table. Okay, similar kind of purpose like what other constraints, default, check, unique. So these two also provide some benefit to the table. That is the reason we have categorized identity and not null into the constraints topic. Actually, these two are the properties to a table, not the 100% constraints. Okay, suppose if somebody will ask you, tell them this identity and not null also be a constraint. Only few people know that these two are the properties of a table, not the constraints. Okay, so any questions so far? Identity, not null, in any other concepts? Okay, so I will continue with respect to other topics in the tomorrow class. Tomorrow we will see all the other constraints. Default I will explain, check, unique, primary key, foreign key. So that class will be really interesting. Please watch this recording and please look at the scripts. I'm going to provide the scripts as well. If you want to go through the script before my class, that is also fine. That will be very, very good for you. You will have some understanding over the day, over the concept. Okay. So please note it down. If you have any doubts, we will discuss in the next class. Thank you very much. I'm leaving a bit early. I will compensate in the tomorrow class. Good day to all of you. Good night to yes people. Okay. Bye bye.